Just as I arrived in this world, an assassin was attacking. My bodyguard pushed me out of the way to protect the second female lead. I was stabbed and nearly lost my life. The system explained. He's the third male lead. You must win him over. It's okay to suffer a little at first. Later on, he'll give up on the second female lead and fall in love with you. My guard knelt on the ground, looking at me with disgust, and said stubbornly, "It's all my fault. Miss Jhan has nothing to do with this." Amid the system's shrill screams, I waved my hand calmly. Wei Ping failed to protect his mistress. Guards, drag him away. Execute him by flogging. Main text. When I arrived in this world, the assassin had just leaped into the princess mansion, scattering the crowd. I had intended to hide, but was suddenly shoved. A piercing pain shot through my shoulder, and my vision went black for a moment. When I turned around, I realized an assassin had just rushed toward the second female lead, Qin Qingzi. To protect her, my guard, Wei Ping, had shoved me into her path, which was why I'd been injured. I felt a moment of dizziness and furrowed my brow slightly. If I remembered the plot correctly, the female lead, that is, my original self, was Wei Ping's savior. Wei Ping's father had been ordered to construct a river embankment but embezzled the funds, leaving only 10% of the budget and cutting corners on the work. Unfortunately, a major flood struck that year, and the embankment was quickly washed away, causing devastation in 2 downstream provinces. Dozens of cities were flooded, resulting in countless casualties. And he was sentenced to be executed after the harvest. Wei Ping, originally a noble young man from the capital, was implicated by his father and was supposed to be branded and exiled to the frontier. Because the female lead had known him in the past and took pity on him, she secretly rescued him and kept him in her mansion as a bodyguard. However, Wei Ping had always harbored a grudge against the emperor, the female lead's father, and consequently came to resent her as well. Coincidentally, around this time, Qin Qingzi, the female lead's cousin, sought refuge with her and took up residence in the princess mansion. After he was injured on a mission, Qin Qingzi had bandaged his wounds. Wei Ping found Qin Qingzi kind and innocent, and before long, he fell in love with her, and it was precisely because of this that he pushed me forward to save her. The assassin was quickly subdued and taken away. I clutched my bleeding shoulder as the imperial physician frantically bandaged me. The matron behind me was both heartbroken and furious. "What good are you lot? The princess has never been injured in her entire life. If the emperor finds out, he'll have your heads. This subordinate failed to protect your highness. Please punish me." Qin Qingzi, her face streaked with tears, knelt before me as well. "Cousin, this is all my fault. Please don't blame Wei Ping. If you must punish someone, punish me." Wei Ping and the other guards knelt on the ground. Everyone else kept their heads bowed, refusing to rise. Only he stared at me stubbornly, a flash of disgust crossing his eyes. "Your Highness, saving Miss Jhan was my own choice. It has nothing to do with her. If you must punish someone, punish me," fearing I might get angry. The system hurried to explain. "Host, don't get angry. Wei Ping is the third male lead. You must win him over. It's fine to endure some hardship early on. Later, he'll give up on the second female lead and fall in love with you." I searched through my memories and, combining them with the system's words, understood. The world I'm in is a wife-chasing hellscape. The female lead is originally a royal princess, yet she must endure the anger and humiliation of the male lead, the second male lead, the third male lead, and who knows how many others, suffering both physically and emotionally just to achieve a so-called happy ending. She was born a princess who had everything, yet she had to degrade herself for the sake of pursuing some so-called male love. Qin Qingzi pleaded on Wei Ping's behalf. "Cousin, please spare Wei Ping. He'll never do it again." But Wei Ping stuck out his chin defiantly. "If it happens again, I'll still save Miss Jhan. If your highness isn't pleased, just punish me." I lowered my gaze to Wei Ping, understanding why he dared to be so arrogant. His confidence stemmed solely from the female lead's past indulgence. She had a timid nature. Every time Wei Ping caused her distress, she would simply endure it in silence. Over time, this had spoiled Wei Ping into such lawlessness. Unfortunately, had picked the wrong person to be so defiant with. I waved my hand and, amidst the system's terrified screams, said calmly, "In that case, men, drag him away." Wei Ping failed to protect his mistress. I spat out the two words. "Beat him to death." A wave of shock swept through the room. Qin Qingzi was the first to react, screaming as she lunged forward. "Cousin, you can't kill him." Wei Ping also froze for a moment, then sneered when he came to his senses. Let her kill him. He was certain I wouldn't dare kill him. The guards and maids all tried to dissuade me. "Princess, spare his life." Wei Ping merely acted in a moment of confusion. His crime does not warrant death. No one moved. Seeing this, Wei Ping grew even more smug, glaring at me defiantly. "It seems everyone in the entire household knows the princess is weak and easily bullied. The son of a convicted minister could even dare to look down on me." I said nothing. Rising to stand before Wei Ping, he glared at me defiantly. Though kneeling, he showed not a shred of submission. The next moment, I snatched the dagger from a guard's belt and, under Wei Ping's gaze of disbelief, plunged it forcefully into his chest, and twisted it violently. His heart was torn to shreds, blood spilling from the corners of Wei Ping's mouth as he stared at me with wide eyes. You. He couldn't even finish a single sentence before collapsing to the ground, dead. His eyes remained wide open in death. It seemed as though, even in his final moments, he couldn't believe I had actually killed him. "No." Qin Qingzi screamed in agony, throwing herself onto his body in tears. No. Wei Lang." She looked up at me with hatred, her eyes bloodshot. "How could you be so cruel?" I replied calmly, "Do you want to die too?" She instinctively recoiled, and when she spoke again, her voice was much weaker as she said through her tears, "Cousin, Wei Ping has served you for so many years. How could you bear to?" I remained expressionless. He was a guard in my household. I kept him precisely to protect me. Now that he can no longer protect me, why should I keep him? To be punished for one's mistakes is only naturalis that not so. Qin Qingzi was at a loss for words. Everyone stared at me in shock. My gaze swept over them one by one. Their shock turned into sheer, terrifying fear. Everyone lowered their heads. No one dared meet my gaze again. I threw the bloodstained knife to the ground and said to the steward, "Replace all the guards, maidservants, and servants who pleaded for mercy just now. I never want to see them again." Everyone froze, then snapped out of it and began begging for mercy frantically, each one banging their head on the ground until it bled. "Your Highness, spare our lives. Your Highness." I was merely momentarily confused. "Please, for the sake of the many years I've served you, spare me this once. Your Highness, spare my life. Your Highness, spare my life. They'll never dare do it again." I shot the steward a glance. The steward dropped to his knees with a thud, cold sweat streaming down his forehead. "Yes, Your Highness." As he turned, his expression had completely changed. He snarled, "Hurry up and gag them. Don't let them defile Your Highness' ears." I turned and walked away. Ever since I killed Wei Ping with my own hands and replaced everyone in the princess mansion, everyone in the mansion obeyed my every command. And no one dared to look down on me as a princess anymore. They even had to kneel before they dared to answer. I drove Qin Qingzi away as well. She didn't dare say a word, probably afraid I'd swing my blade at her next, and left obediently. The system was on the verge of crashing. What on earth are you doing? This is a tragic romance. A chasing the wife to the crematorium story. You've not only killed the third male lead but also driven away the second female lead. How is the plot supposed to progress? What's it to me? But if you keep this up, the male lead and the second male lead will never fall in love with you. I sneered. Is being loved by such idiotic male characters some kind of honor? You kidnapped me here without my consent. This is human trafficking. I'm already being generous by not suing you for emotional distress. Why should I subject myself to your so-called plot? The system was at a loss for words, but forced itself to ask. Aren't you afraid you won't complete the mission and won't be able to go back? I didn't care at all. It's living either way. Now that I'm a princess, I can enjoy all the luxury and splendor. It's even better. The system completely lost it and burst into tears. It's over. It's over. Why did I have to pick such a stubborn pain in the neck like you? They'll definitely fail this mission. What am I going to do about my year-end performance review? I didn't bother with it anymore. I thought that was the end of it. But when I entered the palace again, a young maidservant stopped me. Your Highness, the Empress Dowager requests your presence. I recognized her as the matron who served Lady Jhan. Lady Jhan was the female lead's biological mother. She had originally been just a maidservant. But after being favored by the drunken emperor and bearing the female lead, she was granted the title of lady. Naturally, a noble lady could never raise the princess herself. Fortunately, the young mistress was adorable and immediately won the empress' favor. So she was placed under the empress' care from then on. Logically speaking, for a noble lady to dare give such orders to the princess would be tantamount to insubordination. If the empress were to find out, she would face severe punishment. It was only because the young princess had a gentle disposition that she tolerated Lady Jhan so readily. In fact, Lady Jhan had no affection for the young princess whatsoever. She even resented her because the girl was not a son, meaning she could not elevate her status through her child, and thus harbored bitterness toward her. She had always used the young princess to demand resources to support her own family. Chinchingzi was Lady Jhan's niece, and it was precisely to find a good match for her niece that she had Chinchingzi live in the princess mansion, even ordering me to take good care of her. I am the legitimate princess. How could I possibly go to see a mere noble lady? I didn't stop. I kept walking. The old servant shouted. How can a princess act this way? The noble lady is your own mother. You mean to abandon your mother as well? I turned and glanced at the old servant. She looked defiant, staring straight at me. Actually, I didn't want to kill anyone, but clearly, this old servant had already chosen her own path to death. She looked defiant, staring straight at me. She had served Lady Jhan for many years and usually regarded herself as half a mistress, showing no respect whatsoever for the princess. Her mistress. I couldn't be bothered to say more. I simply waved my hand. Beat her to death. At that, the maids and matrons behind me sprang into action. Without a word, they rushed forward and pinned the old woman down. After her initial shock, the old woman began wailing and screaming. I'm your mother's attendant. You can't kill Meth. Noble lady won't spare you if she finds out. Let me go. If even a single old servant dares to speak to me like this. It shows just how weak my original self really was to have been bullied by a mere servant to the point of being walked all over. The matron slapped her repeatedly with both hands, leaving her cheeks swollen and blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. She shoved some random object into her mouth, leaving her muffled and unable to speak. Just as the commotion was reaching its peak, Consort Jhan arrived in a hurry. What on earth are you doing? Release Matron Li at once. Nanny Li has disrespected her superior and shown disrespect to this noble lady. I am having her beaten to death merely to set an example. Nanny Li forced the handkerchief out of her mouth and, summoning strength from somewhere, threw herself at noble Lady Jhan's legs, wailing loudly, "Noble lady, save me. Her Highness the Princess intends to beat me to death. I've served you all these years, if not for my merits, then surely for my hard work." Consort Jhan turned to me in a rage. How can you be so heartless? Don't you know Madame Li has served me for over a decade? I'm standing right here today. Let's see who dares lay a finger on her. And Kingsish's your own cousin. She traveled all this way specifically to seek refuge with you. How could you drive her away? Hurry up and have someone bring her back. Apologize to her properly and make amends. Tell her you were momentarily clouded by foolishness and didn't mean it. I think you, consort Jhan, are the one with a heart clouded by lard. The mother listed on my imperial birth certificate is Her Majesty the Empress. And the imperial seal stamped on my golden register is that of the Empress. You're just a consort. Since when did you become my mother? Consort Jhan's face turned from red to white, then from white to green. Her lips trembled as she pointed at me. You unfilial daughter. If I hadn't carried you for 10 months and given birth to you, would you have the wealth and glory you enjoy today? Now that you've climbed the social ladder, you've forgotten your own mother. I glanced at this woman, who could hardly be called attractive, with utter disgust. If she hadn't conceived the young mistress, she would have spent her entire life as a servant. Yet she resented that the young mistress wasn't a son. She treated her niece Shinchingsi far better than she did the young mistress. She even once suggested, just to curry favor with the emperor, that the young mistress be sent to the steppes to marry a 60-something Khan in a political alliance. Thankfully, the empress stopped her. How utterly vicious. How dare she call herself a mother? I didn't want to waste my breath. Guards, beat this old nurse to death, I said, enunciating each word clearly. Right here, under my very eyes. You dare. Lady Jhan shrieked. The maids behind me immediately fetched a torture bench and a paddle. Then, outnumbering her, dragged Matron Li over and pinned her down on the bench. Matron Li let out a blood-curdling scream. Honorable lady, save me. Consort Jhan trembled with rage. How dare you? How dare you? I lowered my gaze. The paddle struck down with full force. At first, Matron Li continued to scream, but her cries grew fainter and fainter, reduced to occasional spasms against the paddle. After dozens of blows, she showed no reaction at all. A servant checked her breath and reported back to me. Your Highness, she is dead. Consort Jhan let out a wail and threw herself onto old Lady Li's body. When she turned back, her eyes were filled with venom. You beast. She had lost her mind and began cursing wildly. If I'd known back then, I should have drowned you in the chamber pot the moment you were born. Who do you intend to drown in the chamber pot? We both turned around simultaneously. The Empress, her face stern and dignified, appeared behind me accompanied by a retinue. Consort Jhan's face went deathly pale. She trembled so violently she could not speak. A mere noble lady. And yet you dared to attempt to drown a princess. The Empress roared. This is contempt for the imperial family and an attempt to harm the heir. Noble Lady Jhan was too terrified to move. She threw herself to the ground, weeping uncontrollably. Your Majesty. I was merely momentarily confused. Please forgive me, Zhao Yang. The Empress paused, turning to look at me. How do you think she should be dealt with? I knew the Empress was afraid I might be displeased. After all, Consort Jhan was my biological mother. The Empress had long been aware of Consort Jhan's mistreatment of her own daughter and had tried several times to intervene on my behalf. But I had always begged her to let it go. After several such incidents, the Empress, frustrated by my stubbornness, had stopped meddling in the matter. She was afraid I would plead for Lady Jhan's mercy again. Lady Jhan looked at me, her eyes flashing with hope. Princess, please beg Her Majesty the Empress for me. I was merely momentarily confused. I am your. How could I possibly harm you? I lowered my gaze to look at her. She forced a flattering smile. I said calmly, I report to Her Majesty, according to the law, attempting to harm the imperial heir warrants execution. You dare. Consort Jhan screamed. I want to see the emperor. They'll tell him that you, this unfilial daughter, are trying to kill your own mother. Shut up. The matron behind the Empress caught the hint and rushed forward to slap Consort Jhan twice. Blood trickled down the corner of her mouth. She could only make muffled sounds, her eyes fixed on me in a deathly glare. The Empress also froze for a moment, seemingly surprised that I would order Lady Jhan's execution. She cast a complex glance my way, a hint of sympathy in her eyes. I was taken aback, but quickly caught on. The Empress likely knew how badly Lady Shen had treated my original self, and likely thought I'd finally snapped after being oppressed for too long. So she intended to scare Consort Shen, but in truth, I really did want to kill her. After all, she was my original self's biological mother, not mine. I felt nothing but loathing toward her. Consort Shen has shown contempt for the imperial family, but since she hasn't committed a grave offense, she may be spared the death penalty, though she cannot escape punishment. I will report this to His Majesty. She glanced at Consort Shen, who was weeping and shaking her head. Confine Consort Shen to the cold palace. She shall never leave it for the rest of her life. Consort Shen collapsed to the ground, unable even to cry. I didn't look at her again and followed the Empress back to the palace, after I had paid my respects in the Empress chambers. She motioned for me to sit. I hear you killed a guard recently. I nodded. Your Majesty. When the guard encountered the assassin, he pushed me out of the way. I suspect he was in cahoots with the assassin. Wasn't he your childhood playmate? I recall you once told me your bond was deep. You even came to plead with me specifically to save him. He was merely the son of a traitor. There was no real bond between us. The Empress nodded approvingly. You should have handled it this way long ago. You used to be too soft-hearted and overly kind. But now you've truly grown up. I curtsied. It is all thanks to your Majesty's guidance. Good. She stroked my hair. Now that's my good child. From now on, if anyone dares to upset you, tell me, and I'll stand up for you. I smiled. Thank you, Mother. When I saw Qingqi at the entrance to the princess mansion, I thought I was seeing things. Was she really not afraid of death again? But when I saw the people around her, I understood. Gu Qialan strode forward and snapped at me. How could you drive Qingqi out? How is a defenseless young woman supposed to survive in the capital? Do you have any idea that when I found her today, she was being bullied by a beggar? If I hadn't arrived in time, Gu Qialan pointed at my nose and said, I know you're jealous of the bond between Qingqi and me. Let me tell you this. Even though I married you out of necessity, Qingqi is far more important to me than you ever will be. She comes from a poor background but has a kind heart. You may be a princess, but you're not even worth a single one of her fingers. I fell silent. In my mind, I asked the system, which male lead is this? This time, the system knew better and pleaded softly. He's the second male lead, a key character. You absolutely must not kill him again. I looked at Gu Qialan, a young man as upright as a pine tree, exuding an air of scholarly refinement. No wonder he's the second male lead. Gu Qialan was a scholar traveling to the capital to take the imperial exams. After his travel funds were stolen by thugs, he was left penniless, stricken with a serious illness and unable to afford treatment. He fell unconscious on a small path not far from the princess mansion. It was the original host who, upon leaving the mansion, took pity on him and secretly tossed a silver ingot his way. While gravely ill, Gu Qialan could not make out the original owner's face, only the jade pendant on her skirt. With that silver ingot, he recovered, took the imperial examinations, and emerged as the top scholar. As he rode through the streets in triumph, the princess, seeing the young man in his splendid attire and on his spirited steed, with a face as fair as jade, experienced the stirrings of a young girl's heart for the first time. The Empress, noticing this, took the initiative to inform the Emperor. Since there was no rule in the dynasty prohibiting a prince consort from entering the imperial court, the Emperor sent someone to ask Gu Qialan if he was willing. Gu Qialan did not refuse. However, when he first visited the prince's residence, he encountered Qingqi, who was wearing that very jade pendant. Qingqi had taken a liking to the pendant and asked the original host for it. Gu Qialan, however, believed that Qingqi was the one who had saved him. He had fallen for her and confessed his feelings to her. Qingqi offered no explanation. Instead, to win his sympathy, She told him of the hardships of living under someone else's roof. Gu Kaelon, led by her, harbored no goodwill toward the princess. He saw her as harsh and malicious. Not only did she treat the original owner with cold indifference, but after the emperor's death, she even sent the female lead a letter of divorce, turning her into the laughingstock of the entire capital. The system trembled as it warned me, if too many protagonists die, the world will collapse and you won't survive either. So that's how it was. This is my family's affair. And this is my estate. What business is it of yours? I really couldn't understand. If you feel sorry for her, you can naturally bring her to your mansion to care for her. Why must you spend someone else's money? A few commoners who dared only to watch from the sidelines were pointing and whispering. Exactly. He's about to marry the princess. Yet he's still entangled with another woman, a so-called top scholar. TSK. TSK. What a fine example of spending other people's money. Isn't that exactly what you're doing? Gu Keelan's expression darkened. Qingxi is your cousin. You've killed an innocent man. And now you're kicking her out. How could there be a woman in this world as cold-hearted as you? I laughed. The guard I killed was having an affair with her. Did you know that? Gu Kaelon froze and glanced at Qingxi. Qingxi cried out. I didn't. And you're still trying to smear her. Gu Kaelon flew into a rage. Do you have any idea how important reputation is to a woman? What a vicious mind you have. I know you're just jealous of my feelings for Qingxi. Let me tell you. Song Xiaoyang, I've already promised Qingxi I'll marry her as a secondary wife. I'll never like a vicious woman like you. Give up that hope. I was stunned and asked the system. Has he gone mad? Is this world even normal? The system replied cautiously. Is there something wrong? I was so furious I burst out laughing. He's just a top-ranked scholar without an official post. Yet he's brazenly declaring in front of the princess that he'll take a secondary wife. Does he think his entire clan has lived too long? The system fell silent, then whispered after a long pause. The female lead likes him. She won't hold it against him. I understood. These people were taking advantage of the fact that the female lead wouldn't hold a grudge. Unfortunately, the person inside this body has already changed. Since you're unwilling to marry me, why did you agree when Father Emperor sent someone to ask for your opinion back then? Do you know what the punishment is for disrespecting the royal family and deceiving the emperor? Guards. I pointed at Gu Kaelon. Arrest this traitor who has deceived the emperor. I will personally report this to Father Emperor. The guards behind me, accustomed to such outbursts, swiftly pinned Gu Kaelon to the ground. Gu Kaelon still thought I was bluffing. He looked up and sneered. Do you think I'm afraid of your threats? Song Xiaoyang. You think you can force me to compromise with brute force? You're dreaming. I couldn't be bothered with his nonsense and waved my hand. Take him away. It wasn't until we entered the palace that Gu Kaelon realized I was serious. He gritted his teeth and said, Song Xiaoyang, have you lost your mind? When did I ever deceive the emperor? You were the one who drove Qingxi out. I was merely standing up for her. How dare you accuse me of deceiving the emperor? After taking a few more steps, his voice dropped. This is merely a family matter. The emperor worries about the country and the people every day. If we don't help ease his burdens, that's one thing. But how could we possibly disturb the emperor? I smiled. It doesn't matter. This is also father's family matter. I'm sure father, seeing his daughter wronged, wouldn't consider it a bother. Gu Kaelon softened his tone. There's nothing between me and Qingxi. I just feel sorry for her. You really don't need to make such a big deal out of this. Qingxi, standing nearby, was terrified and sobbing as she was dragged along. Cousin, there's nothing between me and the prince consort. I'm your own cousin. Aunt specifically told you to look after me. If she found out, how heartbroken would she be? It doesn't matter. I waved my hand dismissively. Your aunt was banished to the cold palace this morning for showing contempt toward the imperial family. I doubt she'll ever find out, and even if she did, She wouldn't care about you anymore. Qingqingzi was completely dumbfounded. She slumped to the ground. But the guards dragged her forward. Just as we reached the palace entrance, I gathered my composure, burst into tears, and ran inside. Father, father, you must stand up for your daughter. The emperor looked up, his brow slightly furrowed. Zhao Yang, what's wrong, father? I pinched my thigh hard. I had my heart set on Gu Kailan. I was afraid he wouldn't like me, so I asked you to speak with him in advance. He agreed at the time, and I thought he was willing to marry me. Who would have thought that just as the wedding was about to take place? He told me that the one he's always loved is my cousin, Qingqingzi. The two of them have already made a pact to marry Qingqingzi as his secondary wife after the wedding. Gu Kailan even said he'll never love me, that there's only Qingqingzi in his heart. The emperor was furious. Is this true? I wept, my face streaked with tears and snot. If he had told me earlier that he loved another, I would not have pressed the matter. Why? Having already found someone he loves, did he deceive your majesty? Is this not? The emperor finished the sentence I had left unsaid. The crime of deceiving the sovereign. He glared coldly at Gu Kailan. Gu Kailan, is what the princess says true? Gu Quellen's face turned pale, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead. Your Majesty. This is all a misunderstanding. I have no improper relationship with Miss Shen. I was merely saved by her once and wished to repay her kindness. Oh, what favor did she do for you? Gu Kailan dared not look up. Before I passed the imperial examinations, I was robbed by bandits. After being injured, I collapsed on the street with no money for medical treatment. It was Miss Shen who gave me some silver, allowing me to survive. I am deeply grateful for her kindness. The emperor narrowed his eyes. Since you were unconscious, how do you know it was she who saved you? In my half-awake, half-asleep state, I saw a jade pendant on my savior's body. Later, I saw it on Miss Shen's person, and she admitted it herself. This is absolutely true. I would never dare to deceive your majesty. Where is the jade pendant? As he spoke, he looked at Qingqingzi. Quickly, bring out that jade pendant. Qingqingzi's body swayed as if about to collapse. She bit her lower lip hard. Gu Kailan urged. Qingzi, quickly produce the jade pendant for his majesty to inspect, so he may know we are not deceiving him. Qingqingzi averted her gaze. Two don't have it. You clearly have it. Gu Kailan snapped, growing impatient. I saw it just a moment ago. The emperor turned his gaze toward Qingqingzi. Qingqingzi's face was deathly pale. She had no choice but to produce the jade pendant. A eunuch quickly presented the jade pendant. Your Majesty, please examine it. The emperor glanced at it and recognized it immediately. Isn't this Zhao Yang's jade pendant? I bestowed it upon her on her birthday. Why is it in someone else's possession? Qingqingzi began to tremble all over. I choked out. Miss Shen mentioned a few days ago that she liked it. This servant told her it was a gift from His Majesty. But noble Lady Shen insisted that Miss Shen is this servant's cousin. She said, "It's just a jade pendant." Calling me stingy and harsh toward my own family, she cried and pressured me. I truly had no choice. I bowed my head deeply. The emperor clearly knew the original host's weak disposition and understood this was exactly the sort of thing she would do. He harbored not a shred of doubt. Only Gu Kailan was stunned. He turned abruptly toward me, his voice hoarse. Are you saying this jade pendant is yours? The person who saved me back then, was it you? He grew agitated. Why didn't you tell me? The chief eunuch roared angrily. How dare you, a mere commoner, daring to show disrespect to the princess? I remained silent for a moment, then whispered, You never told me about this. Gu Kailan swayed slightly, his expression filled with pain. The emperor gave a cold laugh. He had once held Gu Kailan in high regard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have appointed him as the prince's consort. But now, The look in his eyes as he gazed at Gu Kaelon was pure loathing. With the jade pendant in your possession, you can choose whomever you please. If a man saves you, do you expect to become a rabbit god? Though the emperor felt little affection for this daughter of his original self. This matter concerned the dignity of the imperial family. For Gu Kaelon to dare to disgrace his original self was to disgrace him. He violently hurled the jade pendant at Gu Quellen's head. You fool! If you did not wish to marry my Zhaoyang, I would not have forced you. Why? After agreeing to the match, did you secretly consort with another? This is the crime of deceiving the sovereign. You deserve to die 1,000 deaths. Sweat dripped in large drops from Gu Quellen's forehead. Your Majesty, please forgive me. I, too, was deceived. The emperor said coldly. No need for further words. Drag him out and behead him. Exile his 3 clans. And ban his 9 clans from taking the imperial examinations. Gu Quellen's face was ashen, his voice trembling. Your Majesty. He turned abruptly to look at me. The former loathing and coldness had vanished from his eyes, replaced entirely by pleading. Your Highness, I was merely deceived. I acted in a moment of foolishness. It was not my intention. I suddenly found it all quite ridiculous. These people had been ruthlessly harming the female lead. Yet the moment they themselves were in danger, they were the first to beg her for salvation. In truth, aside from the female lead's soft heart, they had nothing else to rely on. The emperor's gaze fell upon me, and the system began to scream. Host, you cannot let the female supporting character and the second male lead die. They are major protagonists. The third male lead is already dead. If they were to go too, this world would collapse. I wiped away my tears. Father, Gu Kaelon was, after all, once betrothed to your humble son. I cannot bear to see him die. A glimmer of hope lit up in Gu Quellen's eyes. Why not brand the entire family and exile them to work in the mines? That way, they can atone for their sins. Those working in the mines were all convicts serving heavy sentences. The conditions were brutal, and the food was worse than that of pigs and dogs. In short, it was worse than death. He had once been a top-ranking scholar riding high on success. But overnight he became a prisoner with a brand on his face. How could he possibly bear such a drastic fall from grace? Gu Quellen's face went ashen, and he collapsed to the ground. As for Xin Qingzi, I glanced at her. Since she is, after all, my blood relative, perhaps she should be sent to the Imperial Music Bureau, that is, the Imperial Brothel. Xin Qingzi's eyes rolled back, and she fainted on the spot. I asked the system in my mind, am I being very merciful by sparing their lives? The system shed a tear. Thank you, benevolent one. The emperor sighed. You've always had a kind heart since childhood. Very well. I shall grant your wish. I smiled. Thank you, father. On the day Gu Kaelon left the capital, I went to see him off. The once illustrious Gu family had all become prisoners. His mother, tears streaming down her aged face, knelt before me and pleaded, Your Highness, please intercede with His Majesty. Kaelon is your husband. Don't you love him? Please, plead with His Majesty. Gu Kaelon watched his mother kneel on the ground and kowed out to me. His eyes reddening, he raised his head to look at me. The arrogance that once filled his eyes was gone, and said in a trembling voice, Zhaoyang, this is all a misunderstanding. Can you please explain this to His Majesty for me? My mother is old. How could she possibly endure this? I looked at him and suddenly laughed. Gu Qielon, sometimes I really don't understand. I am a princess, while you are nothing. Yet you dare to humiliate me like this simply because I like you. Apart from my affection, what else do you have to rely on? What are you, really? I leaned close to his ear and whispered, everything that's happened is entirely your own doing. Your bright future, your parents' peaceful retirement all gone. Simply because of your stupidity. From now on, you're no longer the celebrated top scholar. You're a despised prisoner. A pariah to your entire clan. Oh, and by the way, you didn't know this, did you? Your hometown has expelled you from the family registry. Gu Qialan began to tremble all over, his face ashen. No, no. I straightened up, smiling brightly. You fool. With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me came Gu Qialan's hoarse, blood-curdling wail. No. Your Highness, Qin Qingxi has been rescued. The maid glanced up at me and said cautiously, I heard it was young Master Pei who went to rescue her personally. Pei Jhan. I closed my eyes. This is the third male character to appear so far, and he is the true male lead, compared to the second and third male leads before him. This Pei Jhan is the real ruthless one. He is a prince of the Qing kingdom. After Qing was defeated and became part of Great Xia, he entered Xia alone as a hostage prince, staying there for 16 years starting at the age of 9. The emperor kept him close by in the palace, claiming to treat him the same as the other princes. But in reality, it was nothing more than house arrest. With the palace full of sycophants and backstabbers, Pei Jhan endured nothing but cold stares during his years in Great Xia, often going hungry and lacking proper clothing. It was the female lead who took pity on him, secretly bringing him food and supplies before leaving the palace, and bravely speaking up for him whenever his imperial brothers bullied him. Pei Jhan had always been kind to the female lead. As he grew up, he looked after her in every way, bringing her her favorite candied hawthorn on a stick every time he left the palace. The heroine always called Pei Jhan Brother Pei and truly regarded him as an older brother. But Pei Jhan was merely using the heroine to gather intelligence on the court. In secret, he had been bribing court officials and preparing for war, until one late night he finally launched a rebellion and stormed the palace. It was Consort Shen who advised the emperor at the time, suggesting that since the heroine and Pei Jhan had grown up together and shared a deep bond, they should use her as leverage to force him to withdraw his troops. The emperor, who had never felt much affection for this daughter, agreed in his panic. Only the empress refused to consent. But the emperor's mind was made up. He ordered the heroine to be bound to the city wall to threaten Pei Jhan into retreating. Pei Jhan merely sneered and shot an arrow through the heroine's shoulder. Later, Pei Jhan ascended the throne and executed the heroine's entire family, sparing only her to torment and vent his rage. The poor heroine watched helplessly as Pei Jhan, once her closest confidant, slaughtered her entire family. To humiliate her, he kept her in the harem without any official status, using her merely to satisfy his lust, and even brought Qin Qingxi into the harem as well. Qin Qingxi subjected the empress to every form of torment, forcing Hera, woman of noble birth, to fetch water to wash her feet and clean chamber pots by day. It was during this time that the empress discovered she was pregnant. Unfortunately, before she could tell Pei Jhan, Qin Qingxi found out. To kill the child, Qin Qingxi falsely accused the empress of poisoning her. Upon learning this, Pei Jhan flew into a rage and brutally broke both of the heroine's legs. As a result, the heroine miscarried and was left crippled for life, unable to bear it any longer. She eventually lost her mind. Her health deteriorated day by day, and as she lay dying, her mind grew completely clouded, her memories frozen in her childhood. Pei Jhan finally let go of his hatred toward the female lead. He went to see her, but she recoiled in terror. Pei Jhan exclaimed urgently, "I'm your brother Pei." The heroine shook her head and said through her tears, "You're not Brother Pei. Brother Pei was the kindest to me. He would buy me my favorite candied hawthorn." Pei Jhan was overcome with grief and finally regretted how cruel he had been to her. From then on, he brought her candied hawthorn every day. But the heroine, her heart broken beyond repair, eventually died of a broken heart. After her death, everyone began to regret their actions. Pei Jhan posthumously honored her as empress, and his hair turned white overnight. Gu Qialan, who had helped Pei Jhan rebel, also hated him for killing the heroine and began to oppose him at every turn. He erected a symbolic grave for her in the peach grove that had once been her favorite. Engraved upon it were the words, "Beloved wife, Zhao Yang." Wei Ping, meanwhile, stole the heroine's remains, carried them with him, and wandered the world. The story ends here. End. The system boasted. What do you think? Pretty emotionally intense, right? This is our best chasing the wife to the crematorium storyline. Everyone loves it. I lowered my gaze, smiled, and said nothing. Jhan. He had already chosen his own path to death. When I found Jhan, he was practicing calligraphy. You rescued Shinqingzi. I cut straight to the chase, from start to finish. Jhan had never harbored any real feelings for Shinqingzi. He kept her around simply because he knew the female lead disliked this cousin, using Shinqingzi to humiliate her. In the original plot's conclusion, after Jhan's desperate, failed attempt to win her back, he turned Shinqingzi into a human pig to vent his rage. This man has loved nothing but himself from start to finish. Jhan smiled at me. Isn't she your cousin? Going to a place like that might tarnish your reputation. I just bought some candied hawthorn. Try some. Saying this, he personally took the sugar-coated hawthorn from the skewer. He didn't mind the syrup staining his long, fair fingers, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I have to admit, he truly lives up to being the male lead. He's a sight to behold, graceful and elegant, radiating a pure, noble aura. His smile is full of tenderness and sincerity. No wonder the female lead foolishly mistook him for her brother, only to be sold off while still helping count the money. Take these candied hawthorn skewers. For instance, he's stuck with them day in and day out for 10 years, always having them ready whenever the female lead shows up. Most people wouldn't have that kind of patience. If he doesn't succeed, who will? Seeing that I hadn't taken them, Jhan's smile softened. Did I upset you by saving your cousin? Then I'll just send her back. I was only doing it for you. After all, I smiled. No need. Since you brought her back, you might as well take good care of her for me. I glanced at the table. Brother Pei, are you practicing calligraphy? Jhan discreetly tucked a letter away from the table. Yes. I haven't tidied up yet, it's a bit messy. Would you like to join me? Sure. I sat down at his desk to watch him practice. Jhan was incredibly cautious. Every day, he drank wine, composed poetry, went on spring outings, and attended literary gatherings portraying himself as a noble gentleman untouched by the world's corruption. Even the emperor had been deceived by him. He hid his true intentions even from the female lead, leaving not a single trace. I visited him every day for a month, yet I couldn't find a single piece of evidence of his treason. Fortunately, I knew the plot. By observing the people he had promoted since his ascension, I could roughly deduce who was already in cahoots with him. I began to get close to the emperor, preparing soup for him every day and sending it over. At first, the emperor was neither warm nor cold toward me. My original self had a timid and introverted personality, never standing out, so he had no particular affection for this daughter. But I persisted in visiting him daily. I even sought out the Imperial Medical Academy to learn massage techniques, so that when the emperor had a headache, I could massage his head and comb his hair. People are made of flesh and blood. Over time, a hint of warmth began to appear in the emperor's gaze when he looked at me. Once, after reviewing a memorial, he flew into a rage, sweeping everything off the table onto the floor. Panting heavily, he exclaimed, "How dare they? A bunch of scoundrels. Sooner or later, I shall have them all executed." The emperor was old and senile, and the court was in chaos. Otherwise, Jhan would not have had the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Now there were rebellions everywhere. Former vassal states were watching with greedy eyes. The people were struggling to survive, and smoke from battle raged all around. Court officials, forming factions for their own gain, were all urging the emperor to appoint a crown prince sooner rather than later. The emperor, acutely aware of his advancing age and failing health, while his son grew ever younger and stronger, grew increasingly angry over the matter of the succession. They all want me to die sooner, Zhaoyang. The emperor turned to look at me, his expression dark. Do you also think I should name a crown prince sooner? Whom do you wish for me to choose? My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained impassive. Father, you are in the prime of your life, why rush to name a crown prince? In this son's opinion, each of my brothers has his own strengths, but they are, after all, too young. How can they shoulder such a heavy responsibility? I walked over and gently rubbed the emperor's head. They're just a bunch of stubborn old fools. Why should your majesty listen to their nagging? In my humble opinion, your majesty is still young and vigorous. Only you can steer the great ship of the empire. And the people of the realm love and support only you. There's no need to discuss the succession so soon. The emperor paused for a moment. I could feel the tension in his body finally ease. He let out a long sigh. Daughters are the best. After all, from that day on, the emperor's health went from bad to worse. He didn't know that his most trusted chief eunuch had long since been bribed by Jhan, who was slipping colorless, odorless poison into his meals every day. I never told him. I had no sympathy for a father who would tie his own daughter to a city wall to force others to withdraw their troops. Besides, a sick emperor was far more useful to me than a healthy one. Once the emperor began suffering from dizziness and blurred vision, he stopped reading memorials himself and had me read them to him every day. He even had me help him review them. I am a princess. He would not fear me. Moreover, the crown prince, the empress' only son, had his arm severed in an assassination attempt during a campaign years ago, eliminating any possibility of his succession. In recent years, the empress has never meddled in state affairs, and the crown prince has devoted himself to enjoying the beauty of nature. To the emperor, if daughter of the empress was indeed the person he could trust most. I thought the matter was proceeding without anyone's knowledge, until one day, the empress summoned me to the palace. She dismissed everyone and asked me, Zhaoyang, what exactly are you trying to do? I bowed my head in deference. Mother, you should know exactly what I'm trying to do. The empress gripped the armrests of her chair tightly. Your brother is already disabled. He cannot inherit the throne. I replied meekly. If my brother is gone, there is still me. The room fell deathly silent. One could hear a pin drop. After a long pause, the empress fixed her gaze on me and said, enunciating each word, have you lost your mind? Zhaoyang, you are a princess, you are. I knew what she was about to say. You are a woman. Can a woman possibly become emperor? I snapped my head up. So what if I'm a princess? So what if he's a prince? Mother, you once fought alongside grandfather across the land, achieving countless feats of valor. If the late emperor hadn't ordered you into the palace, what great achievements could you have made? You once led 3,000 cavalry to crush Battlebug's camp, capturing the Khan and his 7 sons alive. Could any man have accomplished such a feat? The scent of incense wafted through the room, and I heard my own voice echoing in this deathly silent palace. Now you are trapped within these brick walls, like a falcon in a cage. Have you never once regretted it? Have I regretted it? Have I repented? The echoes swirled around us as the empress stared at me in a daze. She opened her mouth, as if to say something, but in the end, she said nothing. I wasn't disappointed. A woman ascending the throne had never happened in this era. Though the empress was the daughter of a military family, the idea was simply too scandalous for her. Before coming here, I knew I might not be able to persuade her, but I also knew she wouldn't betray me. In the original storyline, when the female lead was tied to the city wall, only the empress risked her life to save her. I also knew that the empress commanded a contingent of iron armor guards left behind by her maternal grandfather, men who had once served as his personal bodyguards and had been scattered and maintained at estates on the city outskirts all these years. Only the empress could command the iron armor wards. They were the lifeline her father had left her. For all these years, not even the emperor knew of their existence. In the original plot, after Jhan rebelled and imprisoned the female lead, The Empress had attempted to rescue her. Alas. By then Pei Zhan's plans were already set in stone, and there was no turning back. The Empress was unable to save the female lead. In the end, the iron armor guards fought until only 100 or so remained, sacrificing themselves to escort the Empress to safety. I know that the Empress harbors deep affection for this daughter she raised from childhood. I bowed deeply. Mother, please do not worry. I will take full responsibility for this matter. If I emerge victorious in the future, I shall honor you as Empress Dowager. If I fail, I will leave a suicide note explaining that you were never involved in this affair from start to finish, and I will take my own life. Having said this, I turned to leave, but just as I stepped out of the palace, I heard a voice behind me. The Empress sounded weary. Her voice was faint yet heavy. Before your maternal grandfather passed away, he left me 5,000 troops. Here is the token to mobilize them. Take it. I turned my head. She was holding out her hand toward me. In the vast palace, only a single beam of cold sunlight fell upon the palm of her hand. There, resting in her palm, lay a bronze tiger token. With the Empress' help, I moved through the imperial court with even greater ease. Although the Empress' maternal clan had long since surrendered their military authority, their years of cultivation had left them with some remaining influence. Many of the court officials whom my maternal grandfather had personally recommended still maintained private contact with the Empress. The Emperor, however, was unaware of this. Pei Zhan's poison took effect day by day, and the Emperor's health grew increasingly frail. His suspicion of the young, vigorous princes reached its peak. Yet he placed ever greater trust in Maya Princess with a disabled older brother and a weak maternal clan. I went to assist him with reviewing memorials every day, and my influence had long since extended into the imperial court. Pei Zhan was unaware of this as well. He was a clever man, but having spent many years with the original host and knowing her well, he had never once been wary of me. Even if he had discovered it, he likely would not have dared to suspect my schemes. When I went to see Pei Zhan again, he was not there. I told the steward to wait for me in the room, but after waiting a while with no sign of him, I simply went into the back courtyard. There, I happened to run into Xinqingxi, who was admiring the flowers in the garden. She was dressed in a watered brocade blouse and skirt adorned with 100 butterflies among the flowers. Her head adorned with a full set of jeweled ornaments, she looked incredibly magnificent. It seems Pei Zhan truly does take a liking to my cousin. The moment she saw me, Xinqingxi's former fear vanished entirely. She looked down at her nails, painted with vermilion lacquer. With a smug expression, Your Highness, you never expected that young Master Pei would rescue me and bring me here, did you? I gave her a once-over. You're living quite well. Of course. Young Master Pei says he likes me very much and even wants to give me a proper status. I said nothing. Xinqingxi mistook my silence for sadness and curled her lips into a smirk. Zhao Yang. So what if you're a princess? Not a single man you like returns your feelings. Even if you use your power to force them, they still all prefer me. She grew more and more gleeful as she spoke, closing in on me step by step, her voice laced with hatred and schadenfreude. Do you really think Pei Zhan likes you? Do you have any idea that every time he claims to have bought you those candied hawthorn on a stick himself, it was actually the servants who did it, and that every time you leave, he goes to bathe in disgust? He doesn't like you at all. You fool, no man likes you. So what? I said calmly. Why should I care if men like me? I am a princess. I have whatever I want. What good would a man's affection do for me? Xinqingxi faltered, then gritted her teeth and said, Don't pretend. You know full well how pitiful a woman is when no man loves her. I replied indifferently. I don't know whether men like me or not. I'm still a princess. Cousin, I advise you to show me some respect. If I were to report to Father Emperor that Pei Zhan is harboring a government courtesan, neither of you would end up well. Xinqingxi's expression changed. You wouldn't do that. Pei Zhan has been so good to you, how could you bear to? I smiled. I've already sent 2 men away. Whether I'd have a heart to do it or not. My cousin. You're probably the one who knows best. It was only then that Shinqingxi seemed to realize I was no longer the Zhaoyang of the past. A flicker of fear crossed her eyes. Just as she was about to speak, Pei Zhan's voice suddenly came from behind them. What are you two talking about? I turned around. Pei Zhan walked over, subtly shielding Shinqingxi behind him. What private matters are you two sisters discussing? He reached out and pulled me toward him. I just bought you some candied hawthorn. I added extra syrup, your favorite. Come with me to try some. Shinqingxi knew Pei Zhan was saving her from an awkward situation. She flashed a smug smile at me from behind him. I didn't argue and obediently followed Pei Zhan away. If I remembered correctly, the tiger token ID fastened around my neck was rubbing against my skin beneath my clothes. I gently squeezed it through the fabric. If I'm not mistaken, Pei Zhan is about to stage a rebellion tonight. The torches lining the street looked like burning dragons. Sparks were whipped up by the strong wind as the Imperial Guards led by Pei Zhan quickly advanced to the foot of the final city wall. The Emperor stood on the city wall, pointing at the commander of the Imperial Guards in uncontrollable rage. Wang Wei, I have shown you boundless kindness, yet you dare to betray me. Wang Wei remained expressionless. Your Majesty, I have always been a man of Prince Pei. I am loyal to my own master. How can this be called betrayal? The Emperor, feigning bravado but inwardly trembling, shouted at Pei Zhan. You rebels dare to plot treason. Do you not fear the condemnation of the entire realm? Withdraw your troops at once, and I shall spare your life. Seeing that Pei Zhan showed no reaction, he adopted a conciliatory tone. In all the years you've been in Great Xia, I have treated you well. My princes and princesses are as close to you as brothers and sisters. Why would you rebel? Pei Zhan sneered. Are you referring to the prince who pushed me into a pond in winter to wager on how long it would take for me to die? Or the one who forced me to bark like a dog? The Emperor was at a loss for words. He had likely heard rumors of the prince's pranks against Pei Zhan when they were young. But Pei Zhan was merely an insignificant hostage prince, and he had simply never bothered to intervene. What about my Zhaoyang? Zhaoyang has always treated you like a brother. She is sincere toward you. Now it was Pei Zhan's turn to fall silent. He shot the Emperor a cold glance. Your Majesty, there are traitors at your side. I have come merely to purge the court of these evildoers. I implore you to open the palace gates. Otherwise, I shall have no choice but to storm them. Everyone knew that purging the court was nothing more than a pretext. At this critical moment, someone spotted me arriving just in time. The Coal Palace was unguarded amid the chaos. Consort Shen, who had escaped the commotion, pointed at me excitedly and said, Your Majesty. Pei Zhan and Zhaoyang grew up together since childhood. Their childhood sweethearts. Why not tie her to the city wall to force Pei Zhan to withdraw his troops? Hell surely give in. The Empress roared angrily. Even a tiger does not eat its own cubs. She is your own flesh and blood. Consort Shen's voice was shrill. I cannot bear to part with her either. But for your Majesty's sake, for the sake of your Majesty's empire, I must sacrifice my own flesh and blood. The Emperor looked at me with some hesitation. I had been by his side for so long in this life. He must have developed some affection for me after all. I gazed back at him quietly. A moment later, he closed his eyes and waved his hand, saying, Tie the princess to the city wall. I smiled. The evening wind howled, scattering my hairpin. My disheveled locks obscured my eyes. I waved my hand. A hidden arrow flew from the darkness behind me, striking the Emperor squarely in the heart. The Emperor's eyes widened in shock. He gasped for half a breath, then fell straight backward. The eunuchs behind him screamed, Your Majesty. A rebel has assassinated the Emperor. Follow me to protect His Majesty. My voice echoed through the night sky. Amid the stunned gazes of everyone present, the sound of synchronized footsteps and the clang of weapons came from behind me. Charge! Slay the traitor! Follow His Highness to protect the Emperor. The Empress' ironclad army stormed the battlefield. These soldiers, seasoned from the front lines, were brimming with fighting spirit. Although Jhan had planned this carefully, the Imperial Guards had never seen real combat. Before long, they were routed by the ironclad army. Abandoning their armor and helmets, I climbed onto the city wall, and the commander of the Iron Armor Army strode forward and knelt on one knee. "Your Highness, a dragon cannot go a single day without a head. Now, only you can avenge His Majesty. Please ascend the throne." The crowd erupted in an uproar. Consort Jhan pointed at me. "She's a woman, how could she possibly become emperor? Have you lost your mind?" The ministers who had rushed to protect the court also spoke out in condemnation. "A hen crowing at dawn spells chaos for the realm. How can a woman ascend the throne? It's utterly absurd." Some of my advisors spoke up in my defense. "The crown prince is unfit for the task. If it weren't for your highness tonight, the empire would have fallen into the hands of another. Why can't your highness ascend the throne? Your highness has turned the tide, possesses a vision for the realm, and is beloved by the people. If His Majesty were still alive, he would surely have passed the throne to your highness." Nonsense. There has never been a precedent for passing the throne to a princess. But here we are. Isn't that so? A censor surnamed Sure stepped forward, pointing at me and berating me. How dare a princess break the ancestral rules? Keeping a private army is already a grave crime. Hand over the tiger token to the crown prince at once, and step down to confess your guilt. Oh, a sure path to death. I drew my iron guard sword and severed his head with a single stroke, blood spattering 3 feet high. Censor Sure's head rolled to the ground, a fleeting look of bewilderment in his eyes. "Censor Sure, your loyalty to the sovereign was profound. You have now followed the emperor in death." I swept my gaze across everyone present. "Is there anyone else who wishes to die for the emperor?" Everyone stood speechless. Dead silence. Only the fluttering of robes could be heard. A moment later, the left chancellor stepped forward. He was the empress man. Kneeling on the ground, he shouted, "Your Majesty is the chosen of heaven. Long live the emperor. Long live, long live, long live forever." Others followed suit and knelt down. Slowly, more and more people knelt before me. There was no one left whom I had to look up to. Minister Jhan's body went limp, and he collapsed to the ground. A deafening roar erupted from the city walls. "Long live the emperor! Long live! Long live! Long live forever!" Below the walls, Jhan was being led away. He raised his head and looked at me in disbelief. I walked over to the emperor and gently closed his open eyes. "Father, I will avenge you. Rest in peace." By the time I saw Jhan again, I had firmly secured the imperial throne. Jhan was in better shape than I had imagined. Even in prison, he didn't look as disheveled as I'd expected. He maintained his dignity. Upon seeing me, he didn't beg for release, but simply lowered his gaze and said, "Zhao Yang, have you been well these past days?" "Not very well." I was telling the truth. "I've killed far too many people lately. Father must be lonely all alone in the underground palace. So I sent Consort Jhan down to keep him company. I came to power too late. Though I've managed to establish some influence in the court with the Empress' help, there are still many voices of opposition. Fortunately, those voices have dwindled as I've kept killing. Kill a few more, and they'll be gone. I don't care how history books portray me, patricide, or usurpation. All I know is that history is written by the victors." Jhan gave a wry smile and reached out to take my hand from the railing. "You've suffered a great deal, haven't you? With a nature as kind and gentle as yours, it must have been agonizing to come this far. Who is forcing you? The Empress, or the Crown Prince?" He still doesn't believe I'd dare to plot a coup. "Zhao Yang." He looked at me, his eyes filled with pity. "I really want to help you. I know this burden is too heavy for you. Let me out, and I can help you." I let a smile play across my eyes. "Yes, being emperor is a lonely position. It's truly cold at the top. Why don't I let you out? Brother Pei, would you help me rule as emperor? Pei Jhan paused. Actually, I was forced into this rebellion. I've never had any interest in this position, but I feel so sorry for you. I want to help you. His fingers tightened, and a hint of urgency crept into his voice. If I were to become emperor one day, you would be the empress who sets the standard for all women. And we would rule this realm together. Ha ha ha. I couldn't help but burst out laughing, wiping away my tears. I said, Pei Jhan, I never realized it before, but you're actually quite humorous. Actually, I knew all along that you were planning a rebellion. I leaned in and whispered. Do you know why I didn't expose you? He froze, which was rare for him. A hint of mockery played at the corner of my mouth. The capital's defenses are impenetrable. If it weren't for you, how could I possibly have succeeded with just 5,000 men? Thank you for all these years of working so hard to pave the way for me, Brother Pei. Pei Jhan stared at me blankly. He instinctively took a step back, as if I had suddenly turned into some kind of monster. I looked at him. This man, trapped in his cage, no longer possessed the haughty arrogance had shown toward the female lead in the original plot. The way had seized her by force. He had broken the female lead's legs, caused her to miscarry, and tormented her to death. If the second and third male leads were merely scumbags, then he was worse than an animal. What was his ending again? Oh, 3,000 beauties in his harem. Yet he lived a life of solitude. What a bitterly ironic crematorium of love. The female lead merely lost her status, family, dignity, child, health, and life. But the male lead lost the love of his life. I glared at Pei Jhan, speaking slowly and deliberately, until I finally saw, to my satisfaction, utter despair in his eyes. Someone, turn him into a human pig and lock him in the latrine. Isn't the male lead supposed to be immortal? Then let him live a long, agonizing existential life worse than death. Pei Jhan was turned into a human pig and placed in the latrine, with Shinqingzi positioned right beside him. From now on, they can be together properly. 6 months after my coronation, the Empress Dowager urged me to expand my harem. I agreed. A month later, my harem had grown by dozens of men. Each was a young noble from a distinguished family, handsome and charming, no less than the male lead. Once men became concubines, they too began vying for attention, competing for favor, and growing jealous. Indeed, being a woman is merely a status. However, now the system can have as many male leads as it wants. Before attending court, I stood alone in the grand hall for a long time. Through the main gate, I could see the deep palace walls and the endless lands beyond. Every inch of this land belongs to the king. All of it is my realm. In my heart, I said to the system, "Thank you." The system remained silent for a long time. When did you realize this? After I ascended the throne. I had a dream. In that dream, the so-called original plot was no longer just a line of text in my mind. It became my own lived experience. When I woke up, it felt like a lifetime had passed. I finally remembered. That so-called original plot was, from start to finish, nothing more than my own memories. It was the story of my past life. That person betrayed by her guards, abandoned by her husband, whose entire family was slaughtered by her childhood sweetheart, whose legs were broken, who was reduced to a sex object, lost her own child, and finally died in madness and terror. From start to finish, it was all me, and all of this was simply because I was the so-called wife-chasing funeral pyre female lead. The author destroyed everything I had, yet after my death, granted me the male lead's love as compensation. But I refuse to accept this. I refuse to accept losing everything. I refuse to accept dying in such a pathetic way. I refuse to accept that the entire purpose of my existence was merely for that so-called fleeting and hypocritical love. I refuse to accept this. What also feels wrong is that, from start to finish, As the female lead of a Chasing Thuafitathi crematorium story, I practically wiped out every male character. Yet the system merely gave me a few half-hearted reprimands. Not a single real punishment. This doesn't feel right. What did you sacrifice to let me be reborn? The system took a long time to answer me. All the points you earned from completing missions over the years. I think you're a good person. Your life shouldn't end so absurdly. I once told the Supreme God that this wasn't right, but he told me it was your own choice. You walked your own path. You've always craved love, that's why you ended up here. You got what you asked for. In the end, you got love. Isn't that good? I told it you'd simply been deceived. That you'd never received any other kind of education. That you simply didn't know there are many things in this world more important than that elusive, ethereal love, things like dignity. Things like power. I traded all my points with the Supreme Being for one chance to send you to another timeline to receive a different education. Then come back and relive it all. He made a bet with me. If you can forge a completely different life, hell, return all my points. What if I still make the same choice? The system chuckled, feigning nonchalance. Then it'll be erased. Anyway, after all these years, I'm exhausted. If I don't want to play anymore, I want. But I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. It seems I'll have to keep doing my missions after all. I gazed at the rising sun outside the grand hall. Thank you. I didn't know what else to say, so I could only repeat. Thank you. My former life lay in shambles. I faced the world with kindness, only to be met with endless betrayal. The love I craved was nothing but a castle in the air, ultimately dragging me into the abyss. Yet, there was still kindness in the end. I have no way to repay this kindness. The system's electronic voice carried a hint of joyful reluctance. Take care from now on. I have to get back to my tasks. I nodded. The green mountains remain unchanged, and the clear waters flow on. We shall meet again. After a final beep, the electronic voice that had accompanied me for decades vanished completely. The dragon throne beneath me felt icy cold. I gripped the armrests tightly. Ministers filed in from both sides and knelt on the ground. Long live the Emperor. 10,000 years. My gaze swept across the hall. Outside, the morning sun was rising. Rise. The story ends here. Welcome everyone to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.